Miguel was born and raised in San Luis, Rio Colorado, a small village squeezed between the desert and Mexico's northern border. There, the merciless sun cracked the asphalt and the arid earth, and dreams, like mirages, evaporated before they could even take shape. At 27 years old, Miguel's life boiled down to a routine of mere subsistence and a melancholic stillness shared with his mother, Doña Teresa, in a modest house of exposed bricks. The old noisy fan merely pushed the hot air from one corner to another in the stuffy room, unable to relieve the persistent heat that seemed to permeate the walls and their hearts. The absence of his father was a constant shadow. His father, a man of few words and many longings, had disappeared years before, swallowed by the vast desert in a desperate attempt to cross into the United States. All that remained of him was the heavy silence filling the empty spaces and a faded photograph on the shelf, a portrait of a distant and painful past. "There is no future here, only dust," echoed in the adults' conversations and the neighbors' laments. And over time, this bitter truth embedded itself in Miguel's soul. He watched his friends give up, their ambitions wither under the relentless sun of hopelessness. Yet, deep inside him, a flickering flame resisted, fueled by an unshakable conviction. The pain of leaving, as heartbreaking as it was, would be nothing compared to the regret of never having tried, of having bowed down to the fate imposed by his homeland. This belief became his engine, a silent promise that his life would not be just another story of dust and resignation. Miguel spent his days doing exhausting odd jobs, unloading trucks, helping with rudimentary construction, selling ripe and juicy fruit at dusty intersections under the suspicious gaze of hurried drivers. Every hard-earned cent was saved with meticulous care and secrecy. For 2 long years, he piled up coins and bills, hiding them in a hole beneath the floorboards of his room until the sum reached the amount demanded by a coyote, the key to risking everything on the crossing. The decision to leave was made in secret, guarded by his determination and the desire to spare his mother the agony of farewell. On the dawn he left, the house was still deep in sleep, lit only by the faint moonlight. Miguel, with a tight heart and hands trembling slightly, left a handwritten note on the kitchen table. The words, etched with the ink of an almost dry pen, were a mix of promise and plea. "Mama, I swear I will come back. I love you." He kissed his mother's wrinkled forehead while she slept, a silent goodbye, sealing an unbreakable commitment to himself and both of their futures. The crossing began on a sultry dawn, under a sky dotted with stars that seemed to watch the scene with indifference. The group of immigrants, wrapped in a silence heavy with apprehension and hope, numbered 11 people. There were men with faces marked by life, women with tired yet firm eyes, a teenager barely out of childhood, and an elderly man whose swollen legs already betrayed the weight of the journey before it even started. They all carried light backpacks with the bare minimum for survival, but their eyes were heavy, filled with untold stories and deep fears. They walked for hours, following the hesitant trail of the coyote, a taciturn man whose instructions were scarce and direct. From the very first steps, Miguel remained steady, driven by the urgency of his goal. He ate little, just enough to avoid fainting, and drank even less, rationing every sip of water as if it were liquid gold. When the sun finally broke the horizon, it seemed homicidal, turning the landscape into a blazing oven. But the nights were cold, punishing the bones and exhausted bodies huddled together seeking warmth. On the 3rd day, the group began to fall apart. One of the men, his body giving way under the weight of dehydration and exhaustion, collapsed on the hot sand. The coyote, without a drop of compassion, merely ordered them to leave him behind. The sight of the lifeless body was a blow. 2 others, overcome by terror and fatigue, gave up and took the opposite path, their figures shrinking on the horizon until they disappeared. Miguel, however, kept going. The image of his mother, the simple house, the smell of fresh tortillas she made in the morning, all of this became his mantra. In his pocket, he clutched a photo of her, a small talisman against despair, with the phrase, "Si tú llegas, yo respiro," written on the back, a promise pulling him forward. With each step, the landscape grew more inhospitable, the challenges more brutal. On the 5th day, terror materialized in the form of an armed group that robbed them. They took the little food left, the money they still had, and even their shoes, leaving them at the mercy of the scorching earth and sharp stones. From 11, only 4 remained. Miguel slept under the skeletal shade of a dry tree, his stomach empty, fear eating away at his courage, and his mouth cracked by the biting cold of the desert night. Hope was beginning to crumble, but the promise made to his mother echoed in his mind, keeping him from giving in. On the 7th day, Miguel fell. It was not a simple fall, it was his body, exhausted, surrendering. Literally. His muscles refused to obey, his legs, raw and broken, no longer could support him. He was completely dehydrated, his body burning with fever, his mind foggy. The last thing he saw before darkness swallowed him was the intense blue of the sky. Hours later, he was found by an American farmer, unconscious, a nearly invisible figure in the arid vastness. Rushed to a community hospital in a small Arizona town, Miguel awoke days later in a white, sterile room, without documents, not knowing where he was, unable to understand the voices around him. A nurse, with a gentle smile, leaned over and said, "You're safe now." He didn't understand the English words, but the softness of her voice and the relief in her touch conveyed a sense of protection he hadn't felt in days. For the first time in weeks, he felt safe, protected, a castaway saved from the raging waves. Upon discharge, reality hit him with brutal force. Miguel had nowhere to go. He left the hospital wearing the same torn and dirty clothes he had come in, a silent testimony to the brutality of his journey. He walked for hours under the relentless Arizona sun, aimless, until, by luck or providence, he spotted a church. The simple facade with a cross above the entrance radiated an aura of welcome. As he approached, he discovered the place functioned as a center to help immigrants. Inside, the smell of hot food and the gentle voice of a volunteer surrounded him. He was given a thin mattress in a makeshift shelter, and for the first time in a long time, a plate of hot food. That night, lying on the uncomfortable mattress beneath the faint light of a bulb, Miguel cried. These were not tears of sadness or defeat, but of pure relief. He cried for being alive, for having survived the desert's hell. He cried for having made it, for having fulfilled the first part of his promise. It was a cathartic cry that washed away the dust and fear from his soul, leaving a trail of gratitude and renewed determination. The days at the shelter were a time of transition and adaptation. Miguel actively sought work, driven by the urgent need to build his new life. He got a job washing dishes at a Mexican restaurant in the vibrant city of Houston, Texas. The routine was exhausting. 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. His hands were always wrinkled from hot water and soap, his feet ached, and his mind sometimes felt on the verge of exhaustion. But on the 7th day, his day off, Miguel would not let fatigue dominate him. He washed his few clothes by hand and dedicated precious hours to studying English, using a cell phone borrowed from a roommate, a Guatemalan immigrant. He repeated words softly before sleeping, the simplest phrases, like a mantra for the future. My name is Miguel. I'm from Mexico. I want to work. His dedication did not go unnoticed. Miguel did not limit himself to washing dishes. He observed, learned, absorbed every movement and every smell in the kitchen. He began helping prepare sauces, then assembling plates. The chef, a stern Mexican but with a watchful heart, noticed the shine of dedication in Miguel's eyes and decided to teach him the basics of cooking. In just 3 months, Miguel's hands, once accustomed to hard labor, transformed. He started making the best guacamole in the area, with a secret touch that won everyone over. He began receiving tips, small dollar bills that meant much more than their monetary value. Customers praised his work in English, words he still did not fully understand, but accepted with a genuine smile and a "thank you, sir," spoken with effort and gratitude. But life, like the desert, does not forgive easily, and fate had new trials in store. A year later, the restaurant where Miguel had found his first refuge in America abruptly closed its doors, swallowed by the economic crisis that ravaged the country. Without a job and without a safety net, Miguel found himself once again in a limbo of uncertainty. He heard rumors of work in construction in Chicago, a cold and distant city. With the little money he had saved, he bought a ticket for a night bus. He slept sitting up, his dreams blending with the vehicle's sway, and arrived in the metropolis without a clear destination, only hope burning in his chest. There he was welcomed by a group of Mexicans sharing a cramped attic, with thin mattresses scattered on the floor, a refuge of companionship and longing. They shared rice, beans, and memories of their distant homelands. On Sundays, in a city park, they danced rancheras, the nostalgic songs filling the air, and played soccer, their laughter echoing like a reminder of home. There, among his countrymen, Miguel felt at home again, a link to his roots. At the construction site, Miguel worked hard, his muscles sore and skin calloused, but determination was his strength. He faced Chicago's harsh winter, with its icy winds and relentless snowstorms, with the same courage he had shown confronting the desert's suffocating heat. He learned to use equipment, mix cement in huge mixers, and erect structures that touched the sky. He was building not only buildings, but his own future. However, on a fateful day, while working atop a structure, a ladder gave way. Miguel fell. The pain was excruciating, and the diagnosis devastating: a broken leg. The injury sidelined him for weeks, and without workers' compensation, he was fired. Without a job and no income, the idea of returning to Mexico whispered treacherously. But shame weighed heavier. He had promised his mother he would come back different, not defeated. That promise, an unbreakable bond, kept him from giving up. During the recovery from the broken leg, confined to the small attic he shared with his friends, Miguel felt useless. The physical pain was accompanied by an even greater emotional pain, the feeling of being stuck, of not progressing. Yet, amid forced inactivity, an old passion reignited. He began cooking for himself and his companions, using the little he had. He made tacos, the smell of fresh tortillas and seasoned meat filling the room. The acceptance and praise from his friends were a balm for his soul. One day, the idea, initially a whisper, became a shout in his mind. Why not sell these tacos? With his legs still limping, but his mind full of new possibilities, Miguel bought some styrofoam boxes and the freshest ingredients he could find. He went to Chicago's busy street corners with a makeshift cart and renewed hope. At first, sales were timid, almost discouraging, 3, maybe 4 tacos a day. But he did not give up. His perseverance was a secret ingredient. Little by little, customers began to notice the inviting aroma and the warm smile of the man who, even limping, radiated dedication in his eyes. From 3, sales rose to 10. And one day, to his surprise and immense joy, he sold out. Every taco, every piece of his effort had found a buyer. That night, he bought more ingredients. He made more. Slowly, Miguel became the Taco Mexican, a familiar figure on the corners, always smiling, always with a slight limp, but with unwavering determination in his eyes. His reputation grew, not only for the quality of his tacos, but for his story of overcoming hardship, which, though untold, was deeply felt. 2 years after the accident, Miguel's small business had flourished. He no longer had an improvised cart, but a fully licensed food truck, a symbol of his persistence and success. He worked from Monday to Sunday, no holidays, long days, and short nights. But every effort was worth it. He had a loyal clientele, people who came not just for the food, but for the story he represented. On the truck's awning fluttered a small Mexican flag, a constant reminder of his roots. And for every customer, he handed out a simple card, but loaded with meaning. Gracias por apoyar mi sueño. His life had also improved considerably. He lived alone in a small studio, simple but clean and organized, a space of his own amid the vastness of the city. Most importantly, every month he sent money to Doña Teresa, his mother, along with handwritten notes filled with affection and promises. Estoy bien, estoy fuerte, te amo. Despite the remarkable progress, life in the United States as an undocumented immigrant was not a path without thorns. Challenges never ceased. Miguel endured constant inspections, a source of anxiety and stress. He faced disguised xenophobia in looks and comments that labeled him illegal, as if his humanity could be invalidated by a bureaucratic status. Yet for every insult, there was an act of kindness that reignited him. Children who ran up to say his tacos were the best in the world, with the pure sincerity of childhood. Elderly people who, even without buying anything, returned just to greet him, to exchange words of encouragement. And perhaps most meaningful, other immigrants like him who saw in Miguel a mirror of hope, a living testimony that it was possible to resist and prosper even in the harshest conditions. These small but powerful interactions were the fuel that kept his flame burning. Over time, Miguel saved even more money. His house in San Luis Rio Colorado, once a simple house of exposed bricks, was transformed. He paid off his mother's debts, those that had kept her trapped in a cycle of deprivation. He renovated the house where he grew up, installing a new roof, painting the walls, turning it into a worthy home. He sent new appliances, clothes his mother never had, medicines for her age ailments. He packed each parcel with love and the hope that Doña Teresa could live with more dignity. But deep down he knew this was not enough. Material prosperity did not fill the emptiness of longing. He wanted more. He wanted to have her close, breathing the same air as him, witnessing his life. He wanted to fulfill the promise made on that note years before, which echoed in his heart. "Mama, I swear I will come back." September arrived with a freshness in the air, and with it the certainty that the time had come. Miguel bought 2 plane tickets, one to Mexico, and most importantly, one back for her. The journey home was filled with emotion, each kilometer shortening the distance between the promise and its fulfillment. When the taxi stopped in front of the simple brick house and Doña Teresa saw him at the gate, she froze. The tortilla she was cooking on the stove, the smell of corn and warmth, were forgotten and left to burn in the fire. Her eyes widened in disbelief. For a second she thought it was a mirage, another shattered dream. But then the figure of her son, strong and smiling, became real. She ran to him, arms wide open, her wrinkled face twisted in a mixture of joy and disbelief. The embrace lasted minutes, a meeting of souls separated by pain and united by hope. Miguel, the man who had crossed a desert and built a life from scratch, cried like he hadn't in years, the hot tears washing away memories of pain and sacrifice. He whispered, words choked by emotion, the phrase she had waited so long to hear. "You can breathe now, Mama. I'm here. Now you come with me." The promise was fulfilled. On the last day in Mexico, before they flew back together to a new life, Miguel climbed to the rooftop of the house where he grew up. The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky a vibrant, almost magical orange. He looked out at the vastness around him, remembering his father, the absent figure who had indirectly pushed him. He remembered the desert, that hell of sand and sun that nearly consumed him, the fall, the physical pain, and the resurrection that followed. And in that moment, instead of pain or bitterness, a soft smile formed on his lips. Beside him, Doña Teresa held his hand. Her presence was a balm. Together, they boarded the plane to the United States, not as fugitives haunted by the past, but as survivors, as victors. The crossing, once a desperate escape, now became a journey of return, of triumph. That night, arriving at Miguel's small studio in Chicago, the fatigue from the trip was evident, but the joy was palpable. He set 2 simple chairs on the studio's small balcony. He led Doña Teresa there, and together they sat under the big city's night sky. The cool night air contrasted with the heat of San Luis Rio Colorado. Miguel pointed to the towering buildings, the sparkling lights on the horizon, the vibrant life he had built. "Now you will see everything I have built, Mama," he said, voice thick with pride and gratitude. "All this was for us." Doña Teresa squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with tears only of happiness. The dust had been left behind. The future had finally arrived, brighter than any dream Miguel had dared to dream under the scorching sun of San Luis Rio Colorado. Miguel's Odyssey was not just a story of survival, but a testament to the unbreakable strength of the human spirit and unconditional love. Did you enjoy the story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, whether it's Mexico, the United States, or anywhere else in the world. Your participation means a lot to our community.